Hey everyone, it's Coding with Kareem, and today I want to make a video on dependency injection. Dependency injection is essentially the idea that a class should not be responsible for generating its own dependencies, and if it does require any dependencies to function properly, those should be provided externally, and preferably those should be instantiated before our target class is instantiated. We're going to look at a basic example, then we're going to look at something a little bit more practical. So starting off in this basics file, we have a logger class, which has a public log function, takes in a const reference to a string, and will log to the terminal using cout. And then we have our service class, which takes in a logger, a reference to a logger within its class constructor. And within our list initializer, we actually instantiate our logger field. So as you guys can see, this service class relies on a valid reference to a logger in order to instantiate. And since we're passing in by reference, we are protected from any potential null values. In our main function on line 23, we declare we instantiate an instance of our logger. So we have this logger variable, this logger instance, and then on line 25, we attempt to also instantiate this service class, and we pass in our valid logger instance into the class constructor. And as I said before, we're passing in by reference, so this should allow for the service class to always receive a valid logger. So the idea is that in order to generate a service class, you need to give the service class a valid logger. And that's kind of the idea of dependency injection. And then for proof of concept, I have this say hello method, simply uses the logger field to call the log method. So let's just look at this for proof of concept. I'll run it really quickly. So I just have to compile. Okay, and we get log hello. So that works exactly how we expected. So let's look at something a little bit more practical. In this main file, we have the database class, we have the logger class, and those will be our two dependencies. The database class has a find user method that just checks if a user is Jerry Rice. Shout out to Jerry Rice. And we also have some syntax here. So these are actually deleting our copy constructors. This is responsible for the initializer copy. So initializing a variable with a copy of a database instance, for example. And this would be somebody attempting to copy one value of a valid database into an already instantiated database. So when we do that, when we write code like that, which we do very often, I'll show you a quick example of one, but I won't try to waste time. Let's say we want to instantiate database 2, a new variable with the value from database, right? Something that we do all the time when we code. We're going to get an error. We're going to say database cannot be referenced as a deleted function. The reason why is because, under the hood, we're actually calling the copy constructor and we, deleted it. So we can't do that. And this protects us from creating multiple instances of our dependencies because we don't really want that. We want our dependencies to only work with our target service class and no more. So, now that we know that, we're doing that for both of these dependency classes. We're deleting the copy constructor on database and logger. Within this authentication service class, we have two fields. We have the logger field and the database fields, and these are both references. And within our authentication service constructor, we also take in a database reference, we take in a logger reference, and then within our list initializer, we set up our fields with the references that we got. So this kind of just, takes the idea home that in order to generate an authentication service class, we need a valid logger and a database in order to do its job. And within this authentication method, this public method, we rely on the log method from the logger object, and we rely on the find user method from the database object. So this authentication method is kind of using both of its dependencies in order to validly authenticate. And then in our program entry point, like we saw before, we instantiate a database, we instantiate an instance of a logger, and then we attempt to instantiate an instance of off service by passing in the database and the logger. And by this point, these two have already instantiated and they're external, right? The off service was not responsible for generating the database or the logger. It simply took them in and expected valid objects. So that's kind of just the idea of dependency injection. We call this authentication method on line 49. with Jerry Lewis instead of Jerry Rice. So we're going to expect false or 0 in the terminal. So let's just run this for proof of concept. As you guys can see, we get authentication started, authentication ended, and the integer 0. So that'll be the video on dependency injection. I hope you guys learned something. Like always, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out anywhere you can find me. I will upload this code into my lessons GitHub repository. I hope you guys have a great day, and goodbye.